live.
Hey, welcome back to the House Judiciary Committee this Friday afternoon, February 13th, and we are continuing to receive presentations on budget requests. And this afternoon, we're going to hear from the Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs. Over to you, Tim. Thanks. Nice to see you back.
Thank you very much. Tim Leaders-Newant, Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs. And I will be a bit of a tour guide for you in our budget, also some system pressures. Given the interest of this room. With me in the room is a few wonderful employees from our department, and our Director of Labor Relations and Operations, Lauren Clemens, here will be sharing her screen. And over here we have Kim McManus, who's with you all the time, our legislative attorney, and then Annie Noonan, who is here, who needs no introduction, but is currently helping mostly with fiscal operations and advising me on the department's budget. We are very appreciative of our great team here in Montpelier. So jumping right in, the main thing I'm going to do is give you an overview of things. On your website, there's an executive summary document. It's a 4-page document, which basically is a speed course through our budget and some of the pressures. I'll then quickly mention the 4 budgets that we have. Our department has 4 separate budget lines. State's attorneys, then our special investigation unit. I don't use acronyms anymore, thanks to Angela, our Representative Arsenault, our victim advocates budget, and then our sheriff's budget. But jumping right in, as you know, our department was essentially founded in the 80s because you were sick of having people from all the counties come in and talk about what they needed. So we're kind of county pastor. Our Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs is comprised of 28 constitutional county officers, 14 state's attorneys, 14 sheriffs, so 28 field offices, and then a central office here in Montpelier, the department's headquarters, the executive director's office. And within those 2 entities, there's 2 executive committees, Executive Committee of State's Attorneys and of Sheriffs, 5 each. They hire the executive director, they advise our department, and they also help with policy matters, things that come up where we need support, and they meet on a quarterly basis with each other. We are right now dealing with, if you're looking at the executive summary document, pretty interesting time period. We're engaged in a basically 900-day data analysis. This department started looking at judicial filings back in 2023. And because of that work, I was able to successfully respond to Chair Robin Shai's request this year, and Chair Perchlik, how are things going? Not just this year, but over the last few years. So when you're looking at our executive summary, you'll see 2023 was essentially a high watermark coming out of COVID, but also a residual backlog that existed before COVID. 26,000 cases. I sat here a couple of years ago. We are now at 22,000 cases. So we've moved about 15% reduction in cases. That has been due to a number of things. And I know there's a number of Chittenden County representatives here. Over the last quarter, we've moved 700 cases off the docket in Chittenden County, which is an incredible moment of progress by incorporating human services, Howard Center, and a bunch of other entities right into the court process. And I was reminded by Chair Emmons down the hall that they also tried this in Windsor, and it has happened in the past, was successful in the past, and became a fossil. So we want to avoid fossilization and silos developing in the future. Right now, as you know, we deal with not just the criminal cases, but family cases, CHINs, children in need of care and supervision, youthful offender, juvenile delinquency, and our caseload, which I know this committee is very interested in, 298 cases, but I rounded up to 300. 300 cases per SAS attorney, about 600 cases per victim advocate, and about 800 cases per administrative profession. And that just breaks down by staffing, essentially, right? We have more attorneys than we have victim advocates and admins. Looking at some of the trends, as you'll see on page 1, over the last year, some of that progress has slowed, which is why I said potential plateau. Even though we've had success in Chittenden, we've had some issues in other counties with increasing cases. So 3.5% over the last year. That's what we've moved. Some very positive news over the last 3 years. Basically, over the last 900 plus days, we've had 540 days where we've been in trial across the state. That's very good. In 2024, from 2023 through 2024, we saw a 54% increase in trial date utilization, which is excellent. And over the last year, it's slowed a little bit, but still 24% higher than it was in 2023. There's granular breakdown of trial dates in our massive data presentation, but we used 178 trial dates in the last calendar year, 2025. Looking at what are these cases, what are the 22,000 pending cases? 6,096 felonies, 13,000 misdemeanors. Of that, 111 homicides. Our department is staffing 103 of the 111. Homicide filings are on the increase over the last 3 years. So if you look, 90 pending homicides, and I want to provide a caveat when I'm done with this piece. In 2023, now we're up to 111. So it's about a 23% increase as to the snapshot. If you have a case where someone commits a homicide, it's on camera, it's filed, it is closed within a month, it won't be caught in the snapshot because it came in and out so quickly. Snapshot data is very helpful for us, but it doesn't capture the fluidity of our system. And we had a time period we were nearing 130 homicides. We're at 111 as of the end of last year. That means we closed a lot of homicides over the last 2 years. We've closed a huge amount of 2022 homicides, which is fantastic. We still filed 34 new homicide cases in last calendar year, 2025. So that's a major pressure point. It's also one of the major pressure points on our budget, our expert witness fund. Even though mental health homicide related cases are a minority of homicides, they take up the majority of our expert witness fund dollars. And it really inhibits our ability to move on those cases if we have a limited dollar amount. For example, in a gun case where there's no mental health, we still often need gunshot residue experts. And in a mental health case, those are cheaper, by the way, than a mental health expert. And a mental health expert, we need them for competency. And we need them for the hospitalization, potentially. If they come back to competent again, then we need them for the trial. So we need them all the way through. Recent case right now, we're probably going to spend between $30,000 and $70,000. We will definitely spend over $30,000 in a single case, and upwards to $100,000. And we need to continue to build up our expert witness fund. That is the majority of our expert witness fund, one case. And so that's an area that we will get in more detail with down the hall and downstairs. And we had a good conversation about that yesterday. In the category of what's the other pressure, we have violent crime, homicides being a major pressure point, and then we have people, high volume defendants, 3 or more, 5 or more. We talked about this before in this committee, but the 3 or more group takes up about 44% of all pending dockets. The 5 or more group takes up about 26% of all pending dockets. So, again, homicides and high volume defendants take up the majority of our time, and they also grab more of the public's attention for the very same reasons. People are coming back through. And those are different than incidents, right? A police officer, I always look to Representative Oliver, police officer could interact with someone 15 times. It might be 2 cases or 2 cases that result in a filing, but it's 15 interactions with the police. And so when you look at incidents, if, for example, there's been a lot of news about Burlington and South Burlington and Williston having lots of incidents with individuals, those don't always correlate to a case filing. And if they happen in the same day or same 2 days, it's probably a single docket. So individual counts are different than dockets. You could have 5 counts in a single docket. So when we talk about 20,000+ cases, many counts within those 20,000 dockets. Often also sometimes multiple victims, which goes to the caseload for those victims. 600 cases per victim advocate does not include the number of victims that they are working with. Single homicide cases, often you're communicating with a family of 5 to 20 people that have a real vested interest in what's happening with that case. Some of the interesting things that I, in prior years, have done a less than admirable job of talking about in here, specialized work that we do at the Executive Director's Office. We have the Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutors, 2 of them, 2 deputy state's attorneys, Dennis Wigmans and Matt Dolezal, that work for our central office. And there's a mission with some federal funds, the Governor Highway Safety Funds, is to work on the cases, and I'm going to use the exact terminology that Annie make sure I use: serious bodily injury, death, other highly complex cases, distracted driving, DUI, neg ops, and often the ones where there's death involved or serious bodily injury. They say it right? Reckless as well, right? So we use 2 prosecutors to assist both with training and law enforcement training of our prosecutors, and also actually prosecuting cases with those 2. A high volume, high profile case in Chittenden County was staffed by them recently with pedestrian death. Same in Rutland, same down in Windsor County. So they are deployed to help with those cases. And about 18% of all pending dockets are DUI cases. So it's a huge percentage of what our line staff deal with. And it continues to be an area where a lot of our prosecutors get a lot of experience, a lot of training. Everyone has to do DUI cases. We are, and this is a stopping point because I'm not going to use the word progress, but we've seen a statistical improvement in the number of fatalities. We had 61 fatalities in 2025. 2021, we had 74. So that is an improvement, but 61 fatalities is still awful for the individuals involved. We also have had a reduction in the number of crashes over time, but it stayed largely consistent between 70 and 60, essentially. It always stays in that range. One piece to note is that these are largely not counted in our homicide docket. There is one driving related case that's fairly prominent in the southern part of the state, which is being charged as essentially a murder case. But for the most part, these are charged as DUI, SBI, serious bodily injury cases that are not a part of that 111 pending homicides. But when you combine those, right, we're dealing with 100 to 160 death cases that we're experiencing. Another specialized area, you folks that have been in here for a number of years, are appellate services. We have one deputy state's attorney that covers the majority of all criminal appeals that occur in the state out of our central office, Evan Meenan, who used to work in this building a lot in Kim's position. And incredibly, by the time we did this data analysis, he had filed 100 appeals in his 3 years on the job, 2022 through 2025. And in terms of how many we've closed, or sorry, he's actually staffed 100 appeals. Many of them he's responding to. 81 of those 100 have been closed. 18 are currently active. When you look at a superior court case where you have a filing, an arraignment, and let's say there's a conviction, that's what we call the lower courts. And if it gets appealed, that's where our centralized appellate attorney gets involved. And if a trial happened, it could be thousands of pages of review, sometimes years later. And so it's high volume, high intensity, and it also shapes the case law, which complements your statutory scheme here. So Evan Meenan is the one that works on all of those cases. Our field also does appeals, and he often is counseling them on how to respond to appeals. And the field, deputy state's attorneys in the field also do appeals, but we have a centralized person to help speak with one voice as much as we can in making those determinations. And we're very proud of that work. The filings range from, we had 30 back in 2023. We're at the end of 2025, we had 24 that we had responded to in that year. And those are obviously cases that can be impactful years after a conviction, and a lot of money and time is spent on these cases. So it's something that I always like to highlight as very much still a part of the original case, but it can occur years later. And I should also mention that the family court cases that result in Chin's filings, often Evan Meenan, our deputy appellate services, staffs those as well. So it's not just criminal cases, the majority are criminal, but he does family court cases as well. Another interesting piece that impacts both sides of the house is our state transport program. We have 25 positions, 24 of those positions are funded. And right now, I'm looking at Lauren, 22 are filled. 21 are filled. 21 of those positions are filled. Something we talked about on the first floor of this building in appropriations is that our overtime costs are basically inhaling the rest of our budget, so inhibiting our ability to hire our open vacant positions for transport. And that is a huge problem, right? So we have not a full suite of staff right now, in part because our overtime costs are nearing 80%, and we're not near the end of the fiscal year. So we're way off target in terms of, not off target, but way upward pressure on the overtime budget. And that is often directed by the courts, right? The job duties are set by our department, but the courts are the ones setting the schedule. And often we have very little control over the day-to-day interactions between our transport staff and the system. Another pressure point is the number of detainees. So we have a lot of pending felonies. We have 111 homicides. And so therefore we have a lot of pending detainees. Those people all are presumed innocent and they all deserve to get to court. That is putting pressure on our transport staff with a high level of detainees. A lot of people need to get to court. And previously, we had more support when I would call pure county per diem deputy sheriffs, some of whom had retired from other law enforcement that would help fill the gaps in transporting when our transport deputies were occupied. That staff has dramatically dropped off. Those were pure county deputies, for example. If let's see, Mr. Goodnow was a state police officer. He retires at 55. He wants to continue to work and keep his certification. And basically, he gets a job with a local county sheriff. We need help with transports. You're going to help us. And so we'll give you a car. You have access to a car and help us when we've got a trial day and other transports. That workforce has dropped off dramatically. That older range of people that could drive folks around has dropped off dramatically. And it's borne out in our per diem hours. We pay for non-state employee transport staff to effectuate transports. And those hours are dropping off historically over time because we don't have a lot of people out in the field filling that gap. So it's more and more on our transport staff. Another piece you'll hear, Department of Corrections used to help a lot more with facility to facility so that on the Monday, person doesn't up in Newport there in Marble Valley for their Rutland hearing. That is basically fallen off completely. They need a couple of weeks notice. And even with that, they don't. And I'm looking at Representative Oliver here. We had a lot more support in the past. They have staffing issues, which are very dramatic. So that means that our transport deputies are doing the facility to facility transports in between court hearings, which is those are further trips that we didn't used to have to make that we're making now to make sure court happens. One piece you'll see at the very back of the large document that we sent is we've issued a number of policies and memos to put healthy pressure on the courts to assist us in better managing our overtime and also better managing how we do transports. We hope that the state and our courts move to a block scheduling system with respect to detainees. Certainty between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. You will be heard between 10 and 2 so that our transport staff can get back home and that the detainees can get back to the facilities, not at 11 o'clock at night. And there is a huge document we've shared with corrections in the past. The time it takes to get from each courthouse to each facility broken down by county is something that we maintain. And I don't have to tell anyone that if you try to get to Newport and back from Burlington, it takes a long time. It's 4 hours before you get to court. So if you get seen by 8 a.m. at an 8 a.m. hearing, you've already been in the car for 4 hours. If your hearing doesn't happen until noon, you put in an 8-hour day, and very quickly you're into overtime categories even before the afternoon settles. So we're working on those issues with Judge Zone and Terry Corsones from the Judiciary about how can we get the courts to do scheduling that makes more sense. And obviously continue to utilize virtual hearings when someone is not going to be released. An in-court appearance is never an excuse to meet your client for the first time. And we know that sometimes happens in part because of the pressures on the defense bar's schedule and volume of cases as well. In terms of the crime trends, and these are on the last page, these are a year lagging. So 2024 is the last fully analyzed year from the FBI and the National Incident-Based Reporting System. But you'll see these are pressure points that will feel quite familiar to this committee. From 2018 through 2024, there has been an 110% increase in what the FBI calls shoplifting, but is retail theft in Vermont. Theft from motor vehicles, 84%, aggravated assault, 46%. There's almost bills attached to each one of these in this committee over the last 4 years. And then murder and manslaughter, homicide cases, 73%. In your data, there's actually a breakdown of the number of incidents from 2016 to 2024 that is in an actual breakdown. So I think it's on page 19. We'll find the actual page number, but it's the actual numbers. So you can look at the detail more there. Yeah.
Is there a chart somewhere in here that also shows the number of FTEs for that same time period? Because I know we've increased the FTEs
for who?
for state attorneys, for sheriff, like, it just would be good to kind of.
So we have 94 FTEs. Last year, this committee was supportive of us moving 9 limited service positions to permanent positions. People were in all of those positions. And we were very grateful that this legislature and the governor were in support of moving those positions. And we could look into historically, I mean, that would be in the budget bill, the last years of positions have been awarded. But
That would be helpful. Thank you.
yeah, I mean, you know, from our perspective, when I say 194, it's across the whole spectrum. It's state's attorneys, sheriffs, victim advocates in our central office. Anything on that I missed?
No.
Okay. In terms of looking at our budget asks, and we can follow up, we're sending a memo with the numbers to Representative Squirrel. But in terms of looking at our budget asks, this year, Mr. Chair, I've made sure to prioritize. Last year, I think you asked me and I said, they're all tied for first, and I appreciate that. I was frustrating. And I will say, if Steve Howard is sitting where I'm sitting, he'd probably have a different opinion regarding priority.
I was gonna say, here it comes.
You're right, there it is. What's that? Yeah. No, we were not talking about it. But the number one thing to avoid layoffs is eliminating vacancy savings. As everyone knows, vacancy savings are not true vacancy savings in the layman's use of the terms. It's a can you meet this target? And so we have a breakdown of 330,000 for the state's attorneys. That is multiple layoffs, and we cannot reduce force at this time. For the sheriffs and victim advocates, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but that would be our number one priority: eliminate vacancy savings so we can maintain our workforce.
So where do I find those numbers?
So those numbers will be in the budget document, but we'll send you basically the breakdown of the total. The major one is for state's attorneys, 330,000 will need to be eliminated. And for the sheriffs, we can get you that number probably by the end of this.
139,000 sheriffs.
139,000 for the sheriffs,
Advocates.
and we'll get the victim advocate one in a second.
147,000.
147,000 for the victim advocates.
So you mentioned that you have vacancies right now. So in addition to having to not fill those vacant positions, do you know like how many, what the nut is that you would need to lay off or?
So for the sheriff, the vacancies I mentioned were actually for the state transport program. Those
Just for that?
we have some other vacancies, but we only have one vacancy for victim advocates right now, and it's actually to meet last year's vacancy savings target.
200.
Yeah, which was a substantial amount of money in last year's budget. For the state's attorneys, we can get you a number, but we maintain our force pretty effectively. So in the state's attorneys and victim advocates, we do not have many vacancies. We can get you the full number, but the transport vacancies are because of the overtime. We've had to avoid layoffs, we've had to hold positions open for transport programs. Lauren, if you want to move to the second, the one that's consolidated. So now in your big 155 page piece, we're not going to go through all that. Do not worry, but it is a huge amount of data and narrative. The second piece I just wanted to note before we move on to that is increasing operating expenses. So our expert witness fund is not sufficient to prosecute the level of serious crime and mental health crime and drug-related crime that we are experiencing in the state. It also is not sufficient in our very serious aggravated domestic cases, where we often have to get an expert involved to talk about things that I'm sure this committee is well aware of regarding tactics that defense counsel make in the interest of their clients regarding patents, typically. And so to prevail in those cases, we need experts, and to have those experts do the work, we need sufficient amount of dollars. So that's one area, mostly for homicides, right? Transcripts. So when we're doing all these appeals and obtaining convictions in serious cases, most of those will be appealed. All of those require transcripts, and those can be quite costly per page. It's also to use transcripts for more than just appellate work. We do it for motion practice as well at the lower level. The next major piece for us, which has been an interesting one because it impacts states, attorneys, and sheriffs, extraditions. The same transport staff that are moving people in the state are also leaving the state and going to other states and bringing people back here for trial. That is because Vermont is still a very hospitable environment for the drug marketplace. So if you're engaged in that activity here, and let's say you are picked up with a felony amount and firearms and you're a prohibited person and you assault somebody, you get a few felonies. You may get a citation because you've never had an issue with risk of flight in the past, according to your brief record. So you go back to, and I'm just going to use a state as an example. I do not mean anything by saying Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, New Hampshire, and Maine, places that people sometimes travel to and from to them all. In those locations, we then have to go get those folks when they're picked up for crimes in those locations. And there's now a, which state gets the person first? Misdemeanor in New Hampshire, aggravated assault in Vermont. So we pay for them to come back here and try to expedite those cases as best we can. And because of the increased number of violent crime, extraditions have gone way up. And when we have a transport team going to one of those states, they are not here moving people. So that's a major pressure. With the transport program, as I mentioned, overtime. Yes, absolutely.
I was just curious, we made changes to the extradition laws last year. Did that have any impact positively, or is that just because it was there were corrections wheelhouse instead?
In my opinion, it didn't have any impact on either decreasing or increasing. The criminal activity that sometimes results in an extradition happens before the extradition itself. I think it did help educate the field on what you need to do in an extradition, but it didn't have an impact on volume. Another major piece is the transport program in general, as we talked about, overtime, mileage, and per diems. We pay mileage when people are using the cars, and the sheriffs subsidize the state program. So we use sheriff's vehicles that they pay for, car insurance, restraints, firearms, vests, uniforms. All that is paid for by the sheriffs. We pay the salary and benefits of the transport staff, but we do not pay for the equipment. We do pay for mileage. Also per diems. We still need that per diem budget to ensure that when there is a gap and a per diem can make it work, that we're able to pay for that trip. The last category is required. Oh, yes.
So one thing that's been confusing to me is when the sheriffs have a contract with either courts or I don't know who else, GCF.
Yeah.
How does that, can you just explain how that
Yes.
flows?
And we have a transport policy at the very conclusion of this that actually talks about that. So over in this bucket is state transport activities. They can be ordered, any law enforcement officer can be ordered to transport a person, and the Department of Corrections and any constable, whether or not they're certified or not, but we try not to emphasize that. The transport program is state employees. We have those positions and they're doing that work, and they can be ordered by either a minimus or a transport order, depending on if you're going to or from. The contracts that you're talking about are DMH would like someone to be moved. DCF would like a child to be moved, not a court order, a separate contract with the sheriffs. Nothing to do with our department. It's a separate contract. So that is something that they do, private contract with AHS and the sheriffs. We respond to court orders and minimuses to move people. The court security also is on the other side of the house. We've been in the room during some of those discussions, but sheriffs have to provide security in a statewide contract with the judiciary, also with those county staff and county employees.
So the same people are doing work for multiple contracts
Correct.
and they're working more than 40 hours a week. Who pays the overtime? Is it you guys?
So for the county activities and the county work, that would be the county sheriff.
But if it's the same person and they're doing,
The only time we're paying overtime for deputy sheriffs is when they are state transport deputies that work for our department, and it's for transport activity. Yeah.
okay.
So that's our overtime pressure, is to and from court.
That policy is on page 144.
Yeah, and our policy on transports is on page 144.
Thank you.
We have sort of an appendix of stuff we did in the last year that is policy related issues that we've done.
You have a bunch of pending retirements coming up. Is that gonna be overburdensome, do you think, to help fulfill the transports? And have you thought, or?
I don't know that we have a lot. We've had a couple.
I know there's at least two coming from Chittenden.
I will say when we're filling a vacancy for the transport program, we pay out their leave, which is a cost to the state. And then it is sometimes difficult to recruit. If someone's not a law enforcement officer, they have to go through the academy, even if it's just 3 weeks. But it can be difficult to recruit.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the staffing is gonna become challenging if you lose a couple here and there.
So we've been for the record, Andy, you know, the Department of State's attorney, we've been allowing the sheriffs who have retirement vacancy to go ahead and fill. Even though, for example, on one of the most recent retirements, the payout was $22,000 for annual. So, but we were able to, the shift between the longer tenured employee and the newer employee, the salary difference made it such that we could fill. What Tim was mentioning before was that right now, because of the overtime cost explosion, we've been holding the positions vacant. For example, in Washington, one of the counties had a vacancy, we let them fill that. So we anticipate, you know, each time a vacancy comes up, we look at, do we have the money to fill it? I think for upcoming retirements, if, you know, one or two of those people do decide to go, that we would probably be in the position of allowing those to be filled, but we still have to, you know, have some money coming to us from budget adjustment for overtime. It's only going to bring us, hopefully, to the end of this fiscal year without a deficit. But we still have to hold 3 of those vacancies open, as you know.
My understanding is they're aging out, so there's really not a whole lot of.
Well, you know, it was interesting because I think the committee may know that for people who are in Group C, which is mandatory retirement, that some of the longer term deputies stayed in Group F. So they don't have a mandatory retirement.
Would it be advantageous to raise the mandatory retirement age for transport deputies?
Well, if you do that, they wouldn't, I mean, if they want to stay in Group C.
Correct.
So I think that that's a very big question, because there are a lot of state law enforcement officers in Group C who would not want the mandatory retirement age raised.
Right. Well, my thing is, I know there are different bargaining groups, obviously. There's a lot of folks that could still continue to transport and would continue to want to work just because, you know, they aging out at 57, they would.
So some of what happens is the sheriff, and this happened with a recent retirement in Washington County, the sheriff, that person came back and is working for the sheriff on the sheriff's side of the house, not the state employee. So they could be doing per diem work, they could be doing civil process. And we see that a lot, and I think in your tenure, you saw that a lot.
So just quickly looping back on to finish up our executive summary. The last operational ask that you made that we hope to have an increase in our budget this year on is required training. So whether you're transporting someone in a car, or you're prosecuting someone for homicide, or you're talking with a victim about what a weight of the evidence hearing is going to look like, or you're deciding how to staff your office with respect to caseloads, all of this requires very specialized training. And right now, our training budget has not been updated since the Great Recession. And that is there's a disservice to to the state and a disservice to the field. People get experience in this department by doing trials and being basically in the thick of it. And often we have our annual training in June and we try to shove in all this really specialized work. What we've done over the last year is we try to have a virtual training each month during the lunch hour, and then we plan for our annual June training. And our hope would be to provide a more, and this is a multi-year ask, but it's to be able to provide real substantial management training for state's attorneys and sheriffs, and actual prosecutorial specialization work for the prosecutors, victim and trauma-informed work for the victim advocates, and what I would call trauma-informed work for the whole department in general, because of the type of work that they're dealing with. My number one concern in our department is typically burnout based on the amount of work that they're dealing with. And it doesn't mean that they're always leaving the workforce. It means that people are physically getting the type of work that they're seeing on a daily basis is so tremendously voluminous and difficult. And so whether you're a transport deputy on the road for 12 hours a day, strictly talking with people who have been alleged to have killed other people, that's also pretty difficult work. Standing up physically hard, or you're standing in a courtroom for 8 hours, talking with victims and defense attorneys about serious cases. All of it is quite difficult. And we think the training that we do as a department has to be more substantial. And we hope to be able to provide that in the coming years. And I know we've talked about it in here too, as well, but when something comes up, a particular type of case comes up, hey, we only do that 7 times a year. Well, we should be good at it those 7 times a year, even if we don't do it every day. The last ask that you'll see is No, we're not asking for any attorneys this year. I'm not asking for any transport deputies unless you want to expand the accountability docket, which is a big if and the footnote at the bottom of this page. 6 administrative professionals or legal assistants. These folks can help us move cases quickly, effectively, and they also are the folks in our department with technically the highest caseloads. Secretaries, administrative professionals, and legal assistants. They are dealing with every case that comes in and out of an office. And if they're well-staffed, they can move more cases for the attorneys. They can help attorneys prepare for trial, and they are cheaper than attorneys. That isn't why I'm saying we need them, but it's also because when we increased the number of deputy state's attorneys a few years ago, we didn't increase the number of admins, paralegals, and legal assistants. And all of those attorneys need that support. The next area is victim advocates. About 600 cases per victim advocate. That doesn't count the number of victims. And we talked about it in here, obviously, at length, and your memo last year really points it out as well. But we hope that this committee knows if you have victim advocates that are spending time with victims in cases, it helps us with resolution. Victim advocates will come to the attorney and say, hey, the person I'm working with would be okay with this type of resolution. That helps triage and prioritize for the attorneys. If those victim advocates are not getting enough time with the people that they're helping, then it hurts our ability to move cases, certainly. And I would say with the accountability docket piece, we utilized our Chittenden staff with the special prosecutor. So Sarah George's staff, our SAS staff, worked with the special prosecutor and helped move those cases. If we want to see that expansion be successful, you have options. I think our department has options. We could deploy people to hotspots rather than have them siloed off in counties for the end of time, which sometimes happens and sometimes it's fine. Or we could do a complete field-based approach, and that means we're less flexible, but it's really a decision for the governor and for you all. If you want to see accountability dockets expanded, we can do some of that great work through admins, paralegals, and legal assistants, and having more of a focus on data. That's one of the things that we're able to talk about. We know we moved 700 of 798 cases in a quarter in Chittenden. Tracking that data for the next year will be really helpful to know how successful that program was. Right now, no one owns that data work right now, other than us trying to pull judicial data, which is fine. But I think if we want to continue to see success, we do need to expand these workforce areas. And certainly, if the rest of the law enforcement community is unable to assist with transports and DOC believes they can't do it, both of which I would take slight issue with, by the way, our transport staff would need to be expanded. If the rest of law enforcement is willing to help with transports and moving people, then we don't need as many transport staff. It's a question. Yes, we receive dedicated resources for it, but if there's going to be more cases happening more quickly, we would need more capacity, whether it's with us or with other entities. So that's kind of a big picture for the department. If it's helpful, and I wanted to ask, Annie can help go through how each of the 4 budgets has seen upward pressure from a money perspective in terms of the governor's recommend, or I'm happy to open up for questions, whatever works best for you.
Let's do questions first, because a couple people are not going to stick around much longer. So you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Not sticking around with one.
So I guess I do have a couple questions to kind of cutting to what we need to do, or what our responsibility is for our budget document is. So it really, I mean, first of all, presumably we're going to support the governor's recommendation. I don't know if there's been any pushback from the appropriations committee, probably not, because they only just saw your presentation yesterday. But it would really be what you're asking for beyond the governor's recommend. I assume that you agree with that much. Although my second question is there anything that can be cut from the governor's recommendation? Like, is there anything there that you think could be used for these other things that you find to be more of a priority? Are you prioritizing anything in your budget that you would rather have it somewhere else?
And who knows if I'll get spoken to by any number of people after I say this, but in my opinion, it's going to be a question of, if you want to expand accountability dockets statewide, having a flexible amount of money that can be used so you don't have to do BAA next year or as much BAA next year will be an interesting point. So if we deploy to Windham County or Rutland County next, and we realize we need another administrative professional to help. The volume is too much in Windham. We need to make sure we have someone down there who can help. Whether we're hiring a temp or whether we are hiring or paying overtime for an existing admin to help with more cases after hours, we may not know that now, but we might know it a month in. And so the ability for us to move in that environment will be quite important. So I am definitely supportive of the governor's FY27, what I would call dollars for the accountability expansion. I don't know whether it's too little. I don't know whether it's too much.
There is specifically for state's attorneys and what is
My understanding is it's not allocated to a particular area. In terms of what we've seen, it's for the accountability effort in general. I
$500,000?
believe that's what I understand. So we're obviously very, very supportive of that. The judge time in Chittenden County was quite expensive to pull a retired judge, and he did a fantastic job. So we would be supportive of ensuring that there is a judge in a courtroom and court staff. What I have said for a long time is, and we said it last year, our department could benefit from a docket manager, and whether it's one of those 6 administrative professionals that we've asked for here, or whether or not it's a recommendation from you all, someone that can send to Windham. Here's your 5 or more. We're going to help you analyze which ones have been pending the longest. Right now, we're kind of doing that with the judiciary, but in my opinion, we should be pushing that ourselves. State's attorney should be pushing the ball on that. And having dedicated staff to help with notices, help with discovery, and help track the data, I think would be really important. The data you see in this presentation is mostly a result of my time and a state's attorney's time working on judicial filings, but it's not my full-time job. And if it's something that we had the space to do, a dedicated person to help with this effort, accountability, high volume, we'll call it just high volume defendant population, I think it would be a very efficient use of state dollars to have a person working on that issue statewide, a docket manager for high volume defendants. And they could help. They could help with the cases themselves if you hired an attorney. If you didn't hire an attorney, a paralegal could help prepare documents, including motions to dismiss for cases that are old, which we have been, we sometimes don't feel like we have the time to even look at cases. So having that dedicated type of staffing, in addition to the type of staff the field needs, would be important. But I don't have any, at this point, I think our elimination of vacancy savings would be the greatest point of difference right now in terms of the governor's recommend. We would, that is our number one priority, eliminating vacancy savings for our department.
So the others that you had increasing operating expenses, strategic staffing increases, those were not in the governor's recommend, right? And I just want to make sure that I understood that.
I will say in our operating, it's a little bit more nuanced because there has been increases in our operating that the governor's office has recommended, which we are very appreciative of.
May not be enough.
And I think, yeah, Annie, I might have Annie speak to that if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
In terms of our contracted expert witnesses for both mental health and physical self-help, we proposed a $50,000 increase, kind of as you suggested, Mr. Chair, with the areas where we shifted, we proposed shifting, which the governor's office agreed with.
Right.
I can tell you that the way that these bills are coming into us, you could have one case, one very difficult case that could be $40,000, $50,000 for expert witnesses because it can go back and forth, back and forth. So Tim mentioned that that's probably one of the biggest pressure areas that we see. We also see some with transcription and translation services. We have more people coming into the system who need assistance because they're English second language speakers. So that's a problem. So there are areas of our operational budget where we really feel like we need to go forward, where we weren't able to put more money in based upon the governor's meeting, the governor's bottom line on the budget. And in this budget, with the governor's recommend for us trying to get to where the bottom line of the governor, there are no new positions written in here. They are up on the boards, Tim, showing you those are positions we think we need, but were not proposed for. So I don't want to say not supported, but not part of the governor's discussion with us when we met with the fifth floor.
Right. So I think in the 3 priorities, there is some operational increases, which the governor has supported, and the governor's staff has supported, which are like 50,000 for expert witness greatly appreciated. As stated, that can be one case. And the governor's support in BAA, which I know is a separate conversation, has been tremendous because it goes to the accountability docket and it goes to overtime for transports. Both of those things, we've been in lockstep with the governor's office. There is, in our opinion, we could use more for expert witnesses, for training, for transcription. And when we were talking with Representative Swirl yesterday, and we would want to do a bit of the allocation, but something in the range of $100,000 extra for operating on top of what the governor is recommending would be helpful from our perspective in that second priority. But again, I can't emphasize it enough, elimination of vacancy savings is the number one priority for our department. Everything else would be great, but we know, we spoke with the speaker on Wednesday, the pressures you're dealing with education, with healthcare, we are not blind to that. Both the speaker and the pro tem made that clear to us this week.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very important to have that $100,000 and it's very important to understand that you find that helpful, but not crucial. I mean, that's not, that I understand the vacancy savings are it meets that higher criteria. And no, I appreciate you having those in there, recognizing that chances are slim, frankly, on those, just from what I'm hearing from appropriations on any kind of new positions, particularly. But the one other question, I don't know if I quite asked the question right, or you answered a different question, be really.
I've never done that before.
And that is, so do you agree completely with the governor's recommendation, or are there monies that he has put towards one thing that you'd rather have towards some of these other priorities? Or is it fine, great with the recommendation, but here's one more additional thing, which is the vacancy savings, which is a thing you don't agree with, obviously.
That would be the category we'd fall into the second description of. Okay. We think everything that is being put out there is going to be helpful. And we think in addition to that elimination of vacancy savings and an increase over and above to operating would be fantastic. And, and I think it's more of a question of policy concerning how quickly we want to move. We have slowed in our pace to move cases in the last year. In some of the counties, Addison County, being a small county like that, has really struggled to meet clearance rate targets of 100%, right? We're not meeting that. Last 36 months, Addison has failed to meet that. It met it 16 times, right? Places like Washington County with very, very busy activity. We don't have enough court time, judge time to move cases in Washington County. Windham County, same thing. Rutland County, they've done a great job with historical aging cases, but they've had a recent uptick of high volume folks that are occurring very recently. And so they could use more court time as well, dedicated where we're not competing with the violent felonies. If that's an area of interest and sustaining what we've done in Chittenden, our ability to distribute administrative staff to assist on that and be deployed, as the governor said, I think to drop in, and I don't mind that description, to drop into hotspots. We think that 6 administrative staff and additional victim advocates will help push that. It would be an increase, and we will send the number for the increase in staff that would be needed. But Annie just did the numbers in the last 48 hours on how much each of those positions would cost. Those are estimates. Healthcare, like talking about the other issues, healthcare is driving up our costs and we have zero control. So when you talk about paying a person, $90,000 a year, $80,000 a year, it could be as much as double if they have very reasonable healthcare costs, and retirement goes up every year as well. So,
a family plan in the state healthcare system is over $40,000
Oh, yeah.
for the employer costs.
See education fund.
Yes.
Right.
and those issues bleeding into your environment is I think it's one of the most important issues that we're seeing. We get it, with the education pressures.
Right. So no, I appreciate and how you did the priorities, because we're going to be putting our budget memo together, and we would have your 3 priorities, but they may be split up as far as our ranking in the tiers. I think we did like tiered system last year. That worked okay.
Yes, there was a key on the side. You had to follow the key.
I would make Ian write the budget. I need that by Tuesday morning, okay? So I have one last question, and we have 5 more minutes because we're going to end at 2, and I'm going to let Angela have her question instead of mine. Maybe I'll stall time.
I don't know, maybe it's the same question.
Well, we heard from Representative Squirrel a few days ago, and he mentioned that your department has a carry forward of $800,000. And we just wanted to understand that more.
Yeah, so when we can provide the details on carry forward, one of the things that I think is interesting is the fiscal year does not care what happens from a billing perspective or pressure perspective. So when you hear carry forward, think money that we're spending, it just happens to be during the time of the year where the executive branch says, okay, you still have pressures, let's spend it right now. For example, I got 7 expert witness requests last Friday. I hadn't received a single expert witness request for 3 weeks. They all came out on a Friday. And so percentage wise, we took up another 40% of our expert witness fund was inhaled in one day. So when we talk about carry forward, Annie can detail that for you. That consider it dollars spent, but the inconvenience of our fiscal year being uncaring of what's happening in our department is the best way to think about it.
So that number is primarily reflective of a large chunk of money that was unspent in the Special Investigation Unit budget. As Tim mentioned, we have 4 budget lines. We have the state's attorney, the sheriffs, the victim advocates, and the SIUs. The SIUs have been having an incredibly difficult time connecting with law enforcement support services. So we have part of our money goes for program support to the SIUs and law enforcement support to the SIUs. So because of short staffing throughout the state of Vermont, actually throughout the country in law enforcement services, they're not able to get dedicated law enforcement commitments. So if they don't have a commitment from a local agency or whomever, and state police provide services without charge. But if for example, St. Albans Police Department for many years was supportive of the NUSI, the Northern SIU, they were unable to commit any hours. So that grant for the law enforcement in Franklin County didn't get spent. So there was most of the money that was available in the end of last fiscal year was as a result of NUSI underspending. Plus, Orange County program kind of went down. We've been able to revive it, and Rutland kind of went down at one point. We had to revive it. So when they're not spending money, when they kind of go offline and they have staff, we don't continue giving them money for staff that doesn't exist, right? So that was the bulk. The sheriffs, on the other hand, rolled into June 30th with $1,219 in reserve. So you kind of see this, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Brilliant budgeting.
Unspent, and then $1,200 left in the sheriffs. The state's attorneys, some of that was just sort of, as Tim says, the churn of like people coming out in and out of the system. Victim advocates have so little turnover that last year their vacancy savings number was 270,000. And you think, well, you should be able to meet that. We still have not met vacancy savings for this year. Like we're still struggling to get to that number with the victim advocates. Of course, we're not going to lay anybody off. So what happens at the end of the year is with our core budget lines, and it's year to year, we are able, the fourth floor, Commissioner Gresham will say, okay, it doesn't look like you're going to make payroll for the state's attorneys. And that happened to us 2 years ago. We won't be able to make payroll. So, he'll say, take money from the sheriff, we're going to move money from the sheriff's line. So at the end of, the last couple of weeks in May and June, there's all of this moving money. So that's what happens too. So I have a report that I'm able to provide that can give the committee a little more information about where that money was. But that was pretty much money from the SIU and some money in the state's attorneys as a result of some vacancies that we hit late in the season.
Okay.
We've had a couple of vacancies that we filled, but during the time period where the end of the fiscal year occurred, there was that gap. And so it's sort of like a phantom savings.
Yeah, that's helpful because, and here as my next question was going to be, can you move monies among the 4?
We don't do it during the fiscal year generally. What we do is in the last few payroll periods, we work with finance and management and tell them where the stress is, and then we can move stuff.
Thank you.
It wasn't my question.
Give them
So in 1 minute, so I just noticed there isn't any ask for additional funding for transports. And I know last year we asked for 6. So has pressure been released, or have there been other ways of
Yeah.
dealing with it?
On your website, you'll see that I had a memo that was submitted during your accountability docket discussion. You'll also see at the conclusion of the massive PowerPoint that you have on your website, a Title 24 memo describing that there's a large amount of, there's people, there's entities, there's professions listed in Title 24 that can perform transports that are not sheriff's staff. It's really a question. If the state would like sheriffs to continue to respond to about 100% of the transport orders admitted this, then yes, we would need more staff. And we would need more overtime. If the state of Vermont, utilizing entities like Vermont Emergency Management that we had for the accountability docket, was willing to say, you know what, transport deputies are busy all day today. We need someone from, what's a town that doesn't exist in Vermont, so I don't offend anyone. But well, my town, right? Lincoln doesn't have a police department, the town where I grew up. Lincoln Police Department, can you please help with the transport today? Everyone would need to step up. If we were to expand accountability dockets, even to meet some of our current needs, all of law enforcement would need to be at the table, and the Department of Corrections, to move people in between facilities, and things like civil hearings for PCRs, post-conviction relief cases, CHINS hearings with an incarcerated parent. Our priority is the criminal division. One of the things I haven't mentioned yet is that I worked with Judge Zone and the Supreme Court to alter Administrative Order 18. That was the order about when, Attorney Goodnow has a conflict between two courts, the judge sorts it out. I was previously essentially policing the priority for the transport program and really bothering a lot of judges. I'm not in the judicial branch, and yet I'm telling them this hearing is more important than this hearing. Understandably, that created tension. I was nearly held in contempt for engaging myself in one case in Franklin in particular. Administrative Order 18 means that Judge Zone in the judicial branch will decide the priority, which means that there may be a very serious tie between weight of the evidence hearing and competency hearing, Windham County and Windsor County. The judicial branch will need to sort that out. So getting to your question, we need to improve scheduling. We need to improve how we are booking our transport time. The pressures are all still there, but all of law enforcement plus better scheduling needs to happen. And my hope is that it does happen over the next year. The 6 transport deputies have additional costs, including the sheriffs out in the field that have to get cruisers, all the different things that they need. So put it this way, the request from last year remains. It's just not going to be on my top 3 priorities, because I hope that the courts and the rest of law enforcement recognize that we can't do it alone.
Okay, I do have a question. We started after 1, I think. It was a little after 1.
No, she's going ahead. That's great. Keep it going. Got all afternoon.
I have a meeting at 3, so I can.
No.
You've mentioned the 3B docket and the potential
Yeah.
expansion of that a couple times, and I'm very interested in understanding the resources that would be necessary to how do I say this? So,
Scale.
well, yes, to scale like properly. What I'm worried about is like, oh, look at this thing that works. This is so cool. And then, like you said, either it becomes a fossil or we say we're expanding it and we don't properly resource it, and then it doesn't work as well. Surprisingly, it's so weird how that happens. So I just want to hear from you and from everyone, really, like, what is it actually going to take to make this work?
Yeah. So on your website, you have an answer to this question written by an attorney with attorney language about what I think it would take. But to sum it up, we need to, first of all, make sure that we're tracking the work that we just did well. I mean, no one's owning that right now. I mean, Sarah George is going to step in on every Friday to do the accountability docket, but she doesn't have full-time data staff. She's going to have to take on the tracking exercise that Zach Waite had done on her own.
And I'm not even clear on whether or not that really will be a one-day version of it, exactly what was happening.
Right.
With all the players in the courtroom.
100%. And we hope, I have to say, I want to make sure I make this clear. Howard Center and AHS, that combo, we couldn't have made any of this progress if they weren't in the room. We do not have Howard Center in the other 13 counties. Howard Center has a staff office in the courthouse. Washington County, that's not the case. I don't think in any other county it's the case. And so that's a really big piece that has nothing to do with us per se, that the human services, housing, treatment infrastructure needs to be physically in the courthouse. They can't walk down the street. They won't go down the street after the hearing. They won't. We know that they will not do that. And it's because of the situations that they're in. That's number one. And then the flexibility of court time. These are two things that are out of my control that need to happen. Someone needs to be able to say to someone, we'll see you next Wednesday, and actually mean it. And your trial's in 30 days. Flexibility of court time, AHS right there. And AHS has been a brilliant partner with DOC, all of DMH, all the folks. And I know you don't often hear that from state's attorneys. DMH has been quite helpful, as has DOC in that docket. But that needs to be replicated across the state. With us, it's things like overtime for transports, overtime for admins, paralegals, and probably someone to own the data for us. Like I said, a docket manager to deploy and set up the meetings. Like if we did it down in Windham County with Mr. Goodnow's constituency, hey, how do we do it? You need a release form to say all these people can talk to each other. And that without that release form, then Chittenden, none of this would have happened. So, and from our opinion, I'm not quite sure what we need depending on the county from our resources, other than probably overtime and some additional staffing. But it's those other two things need to happen first. Dedicated court time and human services right there, which is what really drove success. And another thing, Zach had 900 cases. That is totally inappropriate for most other folks, but he didn't have to deal with murders. He didn't have to deal with things, involving extraditions in and out. And that allowed him to be like a social worker prosecutor in that case, in that courtroom. And State's Attorney George closed a huge amount of homicide cases during the last quarter. That's not a coincidence. I mean, I know she said it, the other day. And I don't know if staff in the room has anything that I've missed on that, but I would also, Annie or Lauren, anything you've observed.
Yeah, I would think that, if this were to be replicated, just from a staffing perspective, we took a prosecutor out of the Washington County office to dedicate to, and that's great. And Michelle Donnelly deserves a lot of kudos for her willingness to support the program. But if you're looking at what would be a proper structure, you probably need a dedicated prosecutor, a victim advocate / legal assistant, which we actually do have someone acting in that capacity right now in Essex County, and probably an administrative person to do all of the filings and get paperwork ready, all of that scheduling. So and in a situation where if it's not going to stay, like if it's going to be a 1-year project in a certain county, leaving it to Wyndham, you probably want to hire those folks in the capacity of like a limited service. As temps to me don't, they don't get benefits, they don't get sick leave. I have a hard time, we as a department, we try very hard to make sure we're fair to people who want with us. So I would say we almost want to be looking at pretty limited terms people and let them know this is a year's worth project, right? And then if the project moves from another county, they have those options if they want to go with it, but otherwise they would know that it's been committed to them for a year. So I think people would potentially be interested in that kind of work and take that kind of work. I mean, we see that. I think that might be the structure I would suggest. For a long-term review.
Is a long-term version of limited service like floater? Because I know that's not limited service, but I'm just hearing that we may not have the numbers in every county, but.
The hard thing with floaters is that people, like, say, for example, they wanted to start the program, just make this up, like in Orleans County, and then the person gets told, no, you're in Bennington.
Yeah.
That's from a travel perspective. People are going to, it's not going to do it. So if you could hire locally, people on and they got a job, and the people who come in as limited service, well, you've seen it. They often just stay with the department when a position becomes vacant, right? They move, hey, I'd like to go there. So I think that's a good model because it's kind of, we show a commitment to them. And when things change, we try to make sure that they're first opt for options to come back to the department as a permanent.
Yeah.
And you can actually see on screen the breakdown of the number of people, the number of pending dockets. that we were talking about. So you can see, right, 10,000 people in this have people with 3 or more. So there's 10,000 individuals in the state that right now are kind of in this category. What's that?
Where's what?
Oh, sorry. Here it is, right here. Sorry, 1,700, sorry. There's 10,000 total defendants in the state with at
Yeah.
least one docket.
Okay.
There's 1,700 with 3 or
Okay,
more.
yeah.
665 with 5 or more. So as you can see, it's a minority of persons. Right? If we can just get more services to those people and accountability. I mean, the dispositional data that Zach Wade provided to you wasn't just incarceration. It was parole, probation, treatment court. It was pretty scattered. It was a pretty even pie chart most people at the beginning said, is this just going to incarcerate people? And I think we found out how it's combined.
How many admin staff does Zach have?
So in that situation, what we did was we spent about $30,000 in overtime for administrative staff in Chittenden County in the last quarter. And how many did we deploy in on that from Sarah's office? It was Sarah's.
Basically, anybody who's working in Sarah's office,
That was all.
we're willing to help out.
Wow.
Oh, man, we all have questions.
I'm just wondering if the governor is really clear on what, there was a chunk of money put aside, but like what the range of costs are so that because it feels like us shortchanging that process seems unfortunate. It seems like the governor's office needs to fully understand accountability court and what it's going to cost depending on where it moves.
Right. And I'm going to say something that I think the chair was maybe getting at, but now that he's not here, I'll answer it. Is that the pretrial supervision? Okay, you talked about.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
We need that a whole lot less when we have accountability dockets.
Both. So we have the prosecutors and the defense saying you don't need that.
And that's redeployed.
Can you talk
It
to the
works.
administration?
It works when we have long delays, 30, 60, 90 days. That's where we need it.
Yeah.
We have accountability dockets pushing, and I would say quicker court. And as Representative Oliver said, I think on the radio, this is how court should be. Quicker turnaround time. Then pretrial supervision works when someone's really lagging in the system for multiple months. Yes, I do listen.
Perpetuates the dysfunction rather than.
It's
And
solving
it's
for the
still-
wrong thing.
It still could work though. It works because of the way our lagging system is impacting people
So
right
fix
now.
the
So
system.
Ken had his hand up and I didn't realize since I'm new at doing this. Like,
How did you get promoted to doing this?
because I was sitting next to Martin. You have your hand up next.
That's
Okay.
interesting. So if we were and I'm not sure if this is your category, but I think what I'm hearing it is, if we were to do the same thing in Washington County as what was done in Chittenden County, would that help with your budget and everything else that goes along with it? Will that lower your cost?
Over time, and we've seen State Attorney George said it's reduced the caseloads of our staff, meaning they have more time to work on the serious cases. So I think I don't know, in cost wise, I'm not sure I can say that now, but it will help with the work that's happening in Washington. A pressure point in Washington, just because you've asked, and I know your constituency is, we don't have a detention facility here. So getting people to and from the Washington court is always a struggle. And we also don't have multiple judges. So Judge Pack, Judge Kadams were able to do major felonies down the hallway, while Judge Maley did accountability docket repeat folks. In Washington, you'd have to think about it a little bit differently. Maybe it's a court time or judge time once a week in the family courtroom when it's not being used for family court. That would be a potential model, but then you need to make sure there's transport capacity to push people in and out once a week. Choosing a day a week or a couple of days a month helps with scheduling, no? And it helps with the AHS side. They know, okay, I need people there that day. Ambiguity is what's going to be a problem for this sort of thing. But knowing it's every Friday in Chittenden is, I think, a really good certainty piece for victim advocates to say, okay, I got all my stuff on Monday through Thursday. I got it. My accountability docket notices need to go out there, the week before.
And I hope taking the opportunity to look at that switch to Friday without having the same exact staffing there, if problems are identified, because that will further support what people need to do accountability court successfully. So Tom had his hand up and then Ian and then Angela. Did you asked your question, right?
Just like Martin, I'm done.
I just thought you wanted to,
If you know if, Chittenden County pretrial services people are involved at all in the accountability.
So Special Prosecutor Waite was very much involved with DOC, including the pretrial folks there. They were talking right at the start of the program. He may have told you this, but the defense bar raised a number of concerns, particularly about the analysis that went into whether or not someone should be in pretrial supervision from DOC. So we're kind of learning from that. And so I
I'm
don't,
not talking pretrial
Yeah.
supervision,
oh,
the pretrial services.
oh, PTS, yeah.
Yeah, the direct.
Yes, that's all. And
Okay.
thinking about the release that we signed, it made pretrial services actually something that the prosecutor and the defense and DOC could use. Okay, you've got housing, you're doing this, you've been to treatment 3 times in the last week. That's great. The flow of information back to the prosecutor could only have helped.
It sort of emboldens that
Yep.
group of people into a different.
In fact, there was a special, the Commission on Mental Health that the chair and I are both on. We talked about this a few years ago. If we have more information coming from the pretrial services flow of information across the state, as a prosecutor, I can say it changes my analysis about, does this need a trial? Does this need, incarceration? People are engaging and they're not reoffending. That's fantastic. That's what you want to know. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good distinction, pretrial services versus pretrial supervision. Thank you.
Ian's next.
yes.
I said, it's your birthday.
No.
Way.
So my pleasure
You
to
can
be
have the
here
last question.
again to-
I was just gonna ask, questions can be offline.
I was just gonna ask, did you say you were held in contempt?
No.
All right, that's it. I was close
Say, do you have bail?
I did have to go to a discussion with the judge in person in Franklin County
Yeah.
about why I told the sheriff not to perform a transport.
Yeah.
But we worked it out.
Sure. No, I was gonna, my question was to the chair. I just wanted to know, so we're gonna have this is our last budget presentation.
Well, we're gonna try to get DOC in, but apparently DOC doesn't really want to have us support their budget because they don't give me any time to actually work. So,
Give your money.
was that snarky? Are you
Cool.
listening, DOC? I hope you're listening, DOC. So I'm trying, but no, I just DOC, and I don't know how I'm gonna schedule the limited time that they're making themselves available to have us help with their budget. It's limited. So yeah, we probably are done. Okay.
And so we'll just we'll have some discussions and,
And follow up. We could get follow-up.
So thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, we will be working on the budget memo, and I'm probably myself gonna be doing the first draft on Monday and might just reach out to you if I.
And I hope the prioritization is helpful last year.
It definitely is.
Message received.
No, it definitely is. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nothing.
You can answer your question, but
Offline.
so we're gonna go off live. We're adjourned until Tuesday at